I think we are at a turning point for the Jewish people in the state of Israel today in the aftermath of October 7th. I think there is a huge opportunity to unite the nation here and also to reconnect with Jews around the diaspora who are feeling this backlash from anti-Semitism. And I think we have to start thinking in those old pioneering terms again about we are going to rebuild our country. What kind of country do we want to rebuild? What are the values that are central to all of us? Which are the values that can actually unite us? And what does it mean to build for a stronger future for our grandchildren? I think we should all be thinking about every decision we take. Is this going to create a stronger future for our grandchildren?
This is Women's Gallery, the podcast where we showcase women defining Jewish leadership today. I'm Joanne Greenaway, and each episode I interview one remarkable female leader making a mark on Jewish life. Together we explore different models of leadership across schools, shuls, universities, batei din, and more. And today we are focusing on the fields, and I'm delighted to have with me Danielle Abraham. Welcome, Danielle.
Thanks, Joanne.
Danielle's a fellow Brit, but who is now living in Israel, making her mark over there. To tell you a little bit, she's founder and CEO of Regrow Israel, which is an initiative rebuilding farming communities, restoring livelihoods, and using cutting-edge agricultural technology to strengthen resilience and sustainability. In the wake of October the 7th, Danielle mobilised emergency support for farming communities impacted in the Western Negev and northern Israel, raising over $30 million and supporting more than 110 farms. She's also co-founder and executive director of Volcani International Partnerships, an Israeli NGO tackling global food and nutrition insecurity through Israel's agricultural expertise and innovation. Danielle began her career actually as a senior policy advisor at Mashav, Israel's agency for international development cooperation, and she's spoken at global forums including Harvard University, the World Food Prize, the Milken Institute Global Conference. She holds degrees from Oxford. She lives in Tel Aviv with her husband and 3 children. And last year, she was named one of Israel's 40 under 40 by The Marker. So I'm really excited, Danielle, to have you with us. And I think your leadership really focuses on an area that people don't talk about enough, don't know enough about. So I am looking forward to digging in. And I want to ask you first about this focus that you've chosen on agriculture. I think people wouldn't necessarily assume it when they meet you that, you're into farming. And I would like you to explain to people why that emphasis. You're somebody who made Aliyah, you are a civil servant more generally. And then you decided that you wanted to focus your energy on agriculture. You obviously saw a gap. And then particularly after October 7th, that we're going to speak about more, you really were able to mobilize a huge amount of resource there. But there were many pressing problems at that time. And I think many people decided to give money, whether it was to the Hostage Families Forum or to the army. You saw that it was a better use of communal funds to direct towards agriculture. So tell us why.
Okay, fantastic. So thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to share some of this. So I think really if you want to ask why it started in this focus on agriculture, we have to go back to the beginning. When I was working in London as a civil servant for the British government, I escaped and I went to Limud. And I was inspired by an elderly gentleman that got up on stage. His name's Yitzhak Abt. And he spoke about the good old days and how he was responsible for building the agriculture and developing it and making the desert bloom back in the old days when, there were pioneers who were building the state of Israel. And then how he was tasked by David Ben Gurion and Golda Meir to establish the international aid arm of the state of Israel and share with partners all across the world the agricultural secrets to Israel's success. And I said there and then, I'm going to quit my job for the British government. I'm going to make Aliyah and I want to be Yitzhak Abt. So that initial calling to agriculture was because I saw it as an unbelievable asset that Israel was a global leader of agriculture and countries around the world were reaching out. They wanted to know Israel's expertise and innovation. They were looking for partnership with Israel. And that's what first brought me to agriculture. And I'm still incredibly excited by what Israel has to offer the world. Then October the 7th happened. And we understood very, very quickly that the agricultural crisis was actually at home. And in the few days following October the 7th, I don't know if any of you all remember where you were, it was complete chaos. All of us couldn't breathe. We didn't know what was going on. It was incredibly difficult. But I got a very clear phone call from one of the heads of the regional councils by Gaza that in no uncertain terms told me, Danielle, listen very clearly. Unless we rebuild the agriculture of this region, there is no foundation upon which to rebuild the communities in everybody's lives. Because we have to understand that the communities on Israel's borders, and we need them to be there on our borders, their main income is agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
It's the economic foundation, and it goes to the heart of their identity. It's the old school Zionism. It's the idea that we're going to work the land up to the border. And if they're not doing agriculture there, then they might as well live in Tel Aviv and go into high tech.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the mentality of so many of the peripheral communities. And anecdotally, I can tell you just last week, I was up on the northern border with Lebanon. And as you turn into Metula, that tiny, it's not even a town, right up there on the border with Lebanon, it's, completely surrounded. You turn left at the roundabout. And on their roundabout, in the entrance to Metula, are 3 apples. 3 big art installation apples. And it just symbolically shows that agriculture is who we are. It's what we do, and it's the foundation of these communities. So in the aftermath, we understood immediately that to get these communities and people back on their feet, looking optimistically for the future, we have to support the agriculture first.
Wow, it's so interesting. I thought you were going to say you'd spent time living on kibbutz and got your hands dirty in the fields, which my husband actually did and still, wishes he could still be there. But it was more a role model and what you saw in terms of need that really connected you to that topic.
Yeah, I would love to move to the kibbutz tomorrow. It's the debate that my husband and I have ongoing. But yes, it was about the need and the opportunity to strengthen the state of Israel domestically and internationally, correct?
And when you talk about David Ben-Gurion, I'm fascinated by this because you're really harping back to this old school Zionism. I would say many people would have assumed that we'd moved on from and formed different types and different models of Zionism. And indeed, at the beginning, when the state was founded, there were different models of Zionism. But you're talking about rebuilding farming communities to almost hark back to that pioneering spirit.
Yes.
In making the desert bloom. And is that the way you see it? Or is there a kind of modern twist on that old school Zionist enterprise?
I think there is a modern twist, but I do very much see it. I think we are at a turning point for the Jewish people and the state of Israel today in the aftermath of October 7th. I think there is a huge opportunity to unite the nation here and also to reconnect with Jews around the diaspora who are feeling this backlash from anti-Semitism. And I think we have to start thinking in those old pioneering terms again about we are going to rebuild our country. What kind of country do we want to rebuild? What are the values that are central to all of us? Which are the values that can actually unite us? And what does it mean to build for a stronger future for our grandchildren? I think we should all be thinking about every decision we take. Is this going to create a stronger future for our grandchildren? And yes, we need strong communities on our borders. We need strong communities in terms of economy. We need strong communities that are producing food for national food security. And we need strong communities on the borders for national security. It's the best first line of defense that we have. So I think, yes, there is a very old Zionist spirit there. I often joke that in the old days, when you see these pictures of, the times of David Ben-Gurion, of the pioneers, they're in black and white, these pictures. And in one hand, the pioneers have a hoe, to rake the ground. The other hand, they have those old-fashioned rifles. That spirit is still alive on our borders with our farmers today, except in one hand, they have a Apple phone, with the applications to control the crops, not a hoe. And in the other, they might have an M16, but that spirit is still there. I think the modern twist comes in almost a self-conscious recognition that we did it. Israel realized this agricultural miracle. Back in the old days, we were toiling away, trying to drain the swamps and make the desert bloom. But we did that. And in so doing, we have almost all the answers we need, not only to save ourselves today, but actually to share with the world. And the modern twist is, I think, that if we are smart, we can leverage Israeli agriculture to strengthen ourselves at home and then use it as a partnership for peace globally. So I think that for me is the modern shift. And I see all of that as the new Zionism.
And you're talking about it almost as a unifier, using the land and that mission as a unifying force. Israel is so polarized today, but I'm interested in the extent to which it really does figure as a unifier, because you're talking about the hoe and you're talking about the rifle, but where's the sefer, where's the Torah? And to the religious community, do you realistically see that they are connected to the land in a way that it can have that unifying impact?
I believe so. We work with several religious communities, both in the Otef and also in the north. You have religious kibbutzim, you have religious moshavim, you have mixed kibbutzim and mixed moshavim. And we also have Israeli Arab communities, farm communities. We have an unbelievable Druze community in Beit Jan. And, they're huge supporters of the state of Israel, serving the state of Israel, doing a lot of farming, also in need of assistance. And so, yes, I think it can be. I think like anything, if framed correctly and done in the right spirit, can be a unifying force. And don't forget, I think what we saw after October 7th was this huge unifying force for Israelis at home, but also Jews around the world. We all came together, but we came together in the face of a disaster and a crisis. And that's easy. The question is, how can we create that same unifying factor in the face of something positive, not just as a reaction to something negative? And I would like to see how we can think about agriculture as being something to work towards. It's a positive force for unification and not just a reaction as a backlash to, a threat or an external.
Sure. And actually, we all need food security, so we all should be more connected and understand the need.
Correct. I mean, in the aftermath of the war, we ended up importing more than 60,000 tons in the first 2 months, and we started importing from places like Turkey. None of us, no matter who we are, want to be dependent on our food imports from Turkey and places. So yes.
Sounds risky. Let's think about October the 7th, because I'm reminded very much of an interview that I did a year or so ago with a remarkable woman called Sarah Jane Landsman, who's also a Brit living in Israel, who was the Mazkira of Kibbutz Alumim. And she talked very vividly about what she termed agricultural terrorism. And I remember particularly in Alumim, over 20 foreign workers were murdered at the entrance to the kibbutz. But also the refet, the cowshed, was destroyed with very, very expensive equipment. Lots of chickens were killed. And she described it as a very kind of intentional agricultural terrorism, whereas I think it had been assumed that the terrorists came in to murder people and to destroy homes, but that, everything else that happened was almost collateral damage. So how did you perceive that, and what did you see in terms of the devastation on the ground as far as agriculture was concerned?
Yeah, so when we first got down, which was very soon after October 7th, we saw absolute devastation across the entire region. Kibbutz Alumim is rather north in the Western Negev, and we're all the way down to the south to Cholit, past near Oz. We saw the same devastation. We saw irrigation pipes shot at. We saw reservoirs blown up with grenades. We saw structures like dairy farms blown up. We saw where Kibbutz Alumim, they burnt 300,000 chickens alive. We saw tractors that had been torched to a crisp. We saw gaps in the tractor yard where tractors had been stolen to Gaza. And honestly, for the first 2 or 3 weeks, we assumed it was collateral damage and it was arson. I mean, these are terrorists after all, and they, free for all, they started to destroy whatever they could. And it was only when I was standing at Kibbutz Nachal Oz, which is next door to Kibbutz Alumim, with the head of agriculture called Moran Freibach. Very early on, he said to me, Danielle, I have to show you something crazy. So I walked over with him in the tractor yard, and he pointed down at the floor to a broken plastic box. And on one side, there were these mangled aerials, and on the other side is a broken computer chipboard. And I asked him what it was. And he explained to me that this is an irrigation control box. And they use it in the kibbutz, it's out in the field, and you can sit with your telephone and drink your coffee in the kibbutz, and you can control the water. So no longer do you have to schlap around and open all the pipes. And he said Hamas targeted this and destroyed it. I said, yeah, I see. He said, no, you're missing the point. We had 40 of these, 40, scattered across all of the fields of Kibbutz Nachal Oz, and every single one was targeted and destroyed. And that was the moment the penny dropped for us standing there, and we understood that this was not a random attack. It was not collateral damage. It was intentional. It was systematic, and we termed it Hamas's agricultural terrorism. And it's shocking in a way because it was so calculated. We even believe they might have had special units just targeting agricultural infrastructure, because where many of this infrastructure is far away from where the communities live on the kibbutzim. And you ask yourself, why? Why would Hamas do that? They didn't know the army wasn't about to show up. Why would they take the time away from the population centers to target the agriculture? And I think when you start to think about it, it makes sense. The first, it's the biggest symbol of Zionism. Flourishing fields in the desert, the water, everything we're doing. Second, they knew very well it's the foundation of the economics for the region. And third, they knew it was Israel's food security. This is the region we call the food basket of Israel. And so I think they were very calculated. It was very clear and it was very intentional.
So scary. How much time must have been invested into all of this premeditation?
And it's still an untold story almost, which is perhaps our fault, but it's still an untold story of October the 7th about the agricultural terrorism and the damage that was sustained.
Yeah. Well, thank you for telling it. So you saw this devastation in the wake of October the 7th. But even then, there must have been different ways that money could have been spent, whether it was supporting the people themselves to get back up on their feet, investing in the equipment that had been damaged, or, mental health support, or longer term planning, or bringing people in to actually cultivate the land, because I know that couldn't be left fallow either. So how did you prioritize the funding that you were able to bring in?
So we try to focus on where we have value to add. There are so many incredible organizations and people and civil society that came together in the aftermath to support. I think it was very important for us to ask, where do we have value to add and what are the real needs on the ground? And so our model is always to go straight to the farmers, convene and understand what the real needs are, and then design a response. And that's exactly what we did. And we thought the real need was to create a strategic plan to grow back stronger in the future. We could introduce new technologies and new varieties. Don't grow the old apple, you could grow something cooler. And that's when we realized that Hamas's agricultural terrorism had made all of our ideas about how to help completely irrelevant. We turned up to kibbutz near Oz and we said to them, how would you like to grow back stronger out of all of this? And they said, what are you talking about? Hamas stole over 30 of our tractors into Gaza. We don't have any tractors tomorrow to go back to the fields with. And I asked them, well, do you have insurance? And they said, no, it was an act of war. So I said, well, how are you going to replace all the equipment, all the irrigation? How do you rebuild your dairies and your chicken coops and your greenhouses? And they said, we don't know. They said there's a government compensation mechanism, but it sends out a surveyor and they would say, Joanne, that's a lovely tractor you've got there, but it's 5 years old. So we'll give you $50,000. But to replace it, you need to buy one that costs $200,000. And so there was this huge gap. And I could see that the whole region was paralyzed. The farmers couldn't get back on their feet. So you couldn't even talk to them about anything else. And almost everything was like a knock-on effect. Once the farmers could get back on their feet, money would once again flow to the kibbutzim and the communities. And so we understood, first things first, all fancy plans aside, we've got to get them back on their feet. And the first big grant we did was to complement the compensation from government to make sure that every single farmer across the entire region could replace all of the equipment that they had lost and literally go back to work. And so it was almost a no-brainer looking back about where to start for us. Yeah.
And it's crazy to think that money wasn't automatically coming to them, but we know there were so many things that were, hefka, so to speak, or just a vacuum in those days. And presumably, the government took a while to figure out what its response needed to be. In the meantime, you went off to America and raised $30 million, which is extraordinary. Did you find a way to coordinate with other support that was flowing through? That must have been complex planning in itself.
Yeah, so we want to be very careful we're not duplicating any other efforts by any other organizations, and definitely not the government, but actually complementing. So we try to make sure that we're entering only into areas where there are no other actors designed to respond. And don't forget, Israeli agriculture was very strong. It wasn't an area that we were used to operating in. And I think October 7th revealed some of the vulnerabilities and weaknesses. But because there weren't that many actors in the space, no one was really responding to the need. It was like everyone was paralyzed and frozen. And I think in that moment, you have to act quickly. That is not the strength of a government, not just our government, any government acting quickly is, oxymoron. And that's what we're able to do with philanthropy.
But there was so much trauma at that time. And, this is in a wider context, of course, where we're realizing how many hostages had been taken and a lot of people's emotional responses to go there. But it sounds like you were careful not to have any mission creep and you knew where your focus was needed.
I mean, there was so many organizations with fantastic experience in addressing mental health challenges, and we were definitely not one of them. So we tried to stay exactly where we could offer value. And we brought a whole network of the top agricultural scientists, agronomists, the top people across the country together around the farmers of the Otef. And I think that was very special.
So in terms of the expertise that's required in that area, I would assume that more and more you're investing in mechanization, and when you talk about innovation, that you might need less people. So how do you balance the need to support local people and the foreign labourers with investing in mechanization to relieve the pressure on the people. What's the way forward in that sense?
I think we have to keep in mind the long-term goal, which is going to be building a resilient agricultural sector which can thrive and be profitable and support both our communities on the borders and national food security, no matter what crisis occurs. And therefore, you always need a mix. You want strong Israeli agricultural farmers leading the way on the farms. You definitely need the foreign laborers there. And if you ask any farmer where they want their workers from, they want their Thai foreign farm workers to come back, and they have.
I find that so inspiring to hear, when they were caught up in this absolute massacre and tragedy that they had no connection with beforehand, and yet they still wanted to come back to this country that, thank God has welcomed them.
Correct. There's a special worker in kibbutz Nahal Oz. He was there on October the 7th, and he made it out alive, was evacuated out, and he wanted to come straight back.
Incredible.
It was very, very special. And he's the one that's now overseeing at the dairy there, the robotics. So yes, In addition to that, we do need innovation. We do need mechanization. What they're all interested in is the core robotics and drones that can replace manual labor. And there is a good case for that, but it's never going to replace the human need.
It's what we talk about with teachers as well. We need text people as well as tech people.
Exactly. So we do need a good mix. And that's what builds resilience too, not being dependent entirely on one.
The Big Questions of Jewish Belief podcast is back for a second season. I'm Rabbi Dr. Raphael Zarum, and in this new season, I talk to 4 brilliant minds and proud Jews about their personal beliefs. Anthony Julius speaks to the dead. Naomi Alderman loves a good argument. Adam Wagner sees religion in human rights. And Professor Stephen Frosch says God is not about what exists, but about what is real. Come grapple with the unknowable. Follow Big Questions of Jewish Belief, Season 2 by LSJS on all major podcast platforms.
So I want to focus on you. I think your journey is a fascinating one. Women from South Woodford who ends up focusing on the agriculture sector in Israel. I'm interested in your leadership and how that's been defined by your aliyah, because I think many people fear making aliyah in terms of how will they be able to have an impact on a culture that they don't know so well, they haven't grown up in, they haven't been to the army. And I'm also reading a book at the moment, which I'm finding really informative, called Agents of Change by Adam Furziger, which is talking about specific Americans who made aliyah, who set up educational institutions and had a huge impact, and then how that impact played out the next generation and impacted back to America. So for me, that's really making the case that olim can really bring something different that the Israeli economy, the Israeli society needs. So how do you feel like it's impacted you, the experience of aliyah, in terms of your leadership?
Wow. So it's funny because when I made aliyah to join the Israeli Foreign Ministry, and I realized it wasn't really for me. I was frustrated and I wanted to leave to do something. I had a feeling that when you come to Israel, anything's possible. It sounds silly, but there's a feeling here in Israel that if something doesn't exist, you can create it. It's a little bit of mixture of, that Zionist drive, optimism, and perhaps chutzpah. But that feeling I had isn't a feeling I had in England. In England, I would never say, something doesn't exist, I'll just go and create my own organization or I'll create something. No. But in Israel, that sense of anything is possible felt very real to me. So I think that's one thing. And I think the other thing, you come with a completely different mindset. It's a complete cultural clash for me. I used to work for the British government, which you can imagine how that was. And then when I made aliyah, I walked into the foreign ministry. I was so shocked. In the first meeting, everyone is screaming at each other. And I thought, what the hell is going on here? And I thought, there was a big bust up or it was a fight. And then they all left best friends. And I was like, what the hell happened? And they're like, we were just discussing an idea. I was like, what? What?
Best Jewish tradition of machloket.
Exactly, but it's quite aggressive, or it sounds. And so I think having a British culture meeting some of that also creates a very good mix, or a balance, should we say. And interestingly, today on my team, I'm very proud of the team. We have an unbelievable team. It's really half olim and half Israelis. And I think bringing that experience and the different cultures and the mindsets together is create something very special, which is the state of Israel, right? It's the melting pot here.
Fantastic. I often think that people with hybrid identities or different perspectives are able to sometimes lead from a position of strength because you see things differently and you have this blend of different skills that's quite unique.
Yeah. I tell you what's interesting to me, though, is I feel like the language I'm speaking shapes some of the leadership qualities or the personality. I can be stronger in Hebrew sometimes than in English. And in English, I'm much more reserved, and in Hebrew can be much more direct. It's funny how the language can shape how you
That's
turn up.
funny. People say I act quite Israeli, and I always wear that as a badge of honor. But normally it's about my driving.
It's true, though. I feel like the language does something there.
The way I would characterize your leadership, particularly in the wake of October the 7th, is crisis response type of leadership, the way that you sprung into action. I don't know if that comes naturally to you or if that was something that you learned from previous experience that you had.
I mean, I feel like I've always been active. I think what happened to me since I made Aliyah is I always had assumed that there was going to be an adult in the room that would know what they're doing and take action. And I think since making Aliyah, I've realized we are the adults in the room and it's upon us to take action. And I think if no one is acting, then don't look around, look to yourself and do something. And I felt that very strongly in the wake of October 7th. I looked around and I couldn't see people acting to close the gaps. And so stop looking around, Danielle. Look to yourself and what are you going to be? And it doesn't have to be a big contribution. It can be something very small. But I think if everybody thought like that, we would be in a different place.
Good for you. Good for you. Let me just go back a moment to focus on the kibbutzim and this concept of Zionism, because I really liked what you said earlier about harping back to old school Zionism. And it made me think a lot about my gap year that I spent on kibbutz when I was younger. And since then, the notion that actually the whole sector of kibbutzim is very 1970s and that we've been really moving away from that over the last 20, 30 years. And the focus of Israeli society has been high tech and everybody moving to the big cities and the economy growing as a result. But your focus, and obviously since October the 7th, there's been this renewed commitment to and real respect for the kibbutzim, particularly in the Otef, in the Gaza envelope. I'm wondering about Israel as a society and the identity and the soul of Israel. To what extent kibbutzim and moshavim are still very central to that in terms of our focus going forward?
If we're smart, they will be central to it. We need, they say, there's a joke that if you turn all the lights off in Israel and only turn the lights on in the kibbutzim, you'll see the border of the country.
Gosh.
The kibbutzim were designed to be on the border, to be that first line of defense, to work and be in the periphery.
And we'd forgotten how important that was.
Taking
it for granted.
Exactly. And I think if we are smart, we will re-embrace our peripheral communities, which have perhaps been neglected for far too long. Look at what the communities in the Otef had to go through in terms of rocket barrage after rocket barrage after rocket barrage. Everything in Tel Aviv was fine. And they felt like second-class citizens. And I think that's a long-term strategic mistake. I think we should re-embrace that. I think we should also, it's an interesting dynamic. Yes, for the last few decades, we all got excited by high tech and maybe perhaps more individualism and consumerism and capitalism. I think the world is also questioning some of these values, and people are constantly searching for meaning, for human connection, for community. And that's also what a kibbutz provides. And interestingly, lots of people are looking to move back to the Otef, new families to go to the kibbutzim. I think we just have to create the right incentive structure. I think they need to feel valued. I think they need to feel supported and appreciated and not taking them for granted.
I think in that regard, I just wanted to make a shout out because you're reminding me about the work of my dear friend, Rabbi Joe Wolfson, who has spearheaded an amazing initiative whereby he's connected his community of young professionals in Tel Aviv with kibbutz Nir Oz or Nir Am, I forget which, and developed a really, really close relationship with them whereby they've been volunteering and helping the children and visiting for Chagim, and it's really connected them in a way that they understand each other's lives. And I think that kind of work, building bridges within Israeli society and seeing everybody as this combined family has been some of the incredible result that has come out of the work that's been done since October the 7th.
Definitely.
The other angle of your work that I find fascinating is Volcani International, which I know you set up even before Regrow Israel. And if I'm not mistaken, you're still doing side by side, but it has much more of an external component where you're tackling global hunger with Israeli agricultural expertise.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more about what Israel contributes here in terms of tikkun olam and using its know-how to help to address global food insecurity, because it seems to almost compete with the rebuilding at home. So how do you connect those two sides of your work?
Okay, excellent. So it definitely doesn't compete. It's completely complementary. Before October the 7th, Israel had so much to offer countries and partners around the world. And after October 7th, even more so, because we have all the lessons. So I think everyone has to understand, first of all, that what Israel did at home is completely crazy, right? Israel, no matter what people tell you, is a stupid place to do agriculture. It's a tiny country. It's 2/3 desert. There's not a lot of water. We are situated in what I like to say is a difficult neighborhood, geographically speaking. So our export markets are further afield, which is also challenging. And when Israel was established, we were food insecure, which means there were ration books and we didn't have enough food to eat. Yet what Israel did in a very short space of time was to create what is basically an agricultural miracle, right? We not only realized domestic food security, but we positioned agriculture as a key driver of economic growth. And then we emerged as a global leader of agriculture and water technologies. Now, almost every country around the world today, many, many countries, are struggling with food security, water security, the threat of climate change. Now, it's easy to think just about countries in sub-Saharan Africa who quite literally have such a high percentage of their population in poverty that they don't have enough to eat. But equally, look at the Gulf countries who import more than 90% of their food. It's a huge vulnerability. And all of these countries and partners are looking to Israel for solutions. And so I think it's a huge opportunity. I do believe in tikkun olam. I do believe that Israel has the opportunity to create a positive impact around the world, to serve and strengthen the lives of other people. We have an obligation to do that. I will acknowledge there are definitely benefits to doing that too in terms of international relations and global standing and building partnerships for Israel. But first of all, there is a need on the ground and Israel has something to offer. So it's a privilege to be able to actually connect those dots. So I'm very, very excited about the international work.
Hearing you talk about it, it harps back to this pride that we were brought up to feel in Israel, in Israel's agricultural miracle. And perhaps we've lost some of that along the way. And it's actually really important messaging, not just for the rest of the world, but for us to retain that. And it's on the ground, but it's also reconnecting us to the Torah. You know, there's so much agriculture in the Torah, right? This is not a secular Zionism only. There's, you know, the 7 species and all of our agricultural festivals where we're really connected to the land. But those of us who are city dwellers, we forget about that and how central that should be to our identity.
Yeah, I mean, the Jewish calendar is around the agricultural calendar too, you know? Really, it's not just the festivals, but it's really in sync. It's really at the core.
Totally.
And it's funny because obviously, when the pioneers came to build the land of Israel, they became farmers. But we hadn't really farmed for generations and generations, you know, not really since biblical times.
Right, it doesn't seem like a Jewish occupation.
Yeah, but we always joke that, you know, the people, when they came to build the country, they took such pride in becoming farmers and working the land with their hands. You know, what a symbol of pride to have dirty hands with the soil of the land of Israel. And today we joke that the Jewish mother wants their kids to become a doctor or a lawyer. But maybe in the next generation, they'll say, please God, our child with pride is a farmer once again.
Back
in the land
to big farmers. Well, particularly now that there's so much emphasis on tech and you can marry those two things. Correct. It's a different way of looking at it.
Yeah. The AI revolution.
Exactly.
The AI revolution is coming for agriculture too.
Right. I do think what you're doing in terms of tikkun olam and going out there and selling Israel's expertise to the world has a real hasbara component in terms of PR for Israel, because it's such important work when you're able to have that outward focus. And I don't know how much you focus on that. You're very impact driven, but do you also pay a lot of attention to the narrative and the messaging in that work?
Yes, I am really of the belief that first and foremost, we have to have a tangible, positive impact on the ground. I think the hasbara and the PR will come afterwards. I don't think we can approach it, and it's not my way, as a PR or hasbara exercise. We have to focus on what is the real, genuine impact we can create to improve the lives of others around the world. Then everything else follows if you do that bit very well.
Yeah. Well, that's genuine. I want to move forward by thinking about women, because we do have a focus in this podcast on women and leadership, and you're such a great exemplar. But I wonder whether in Israel, how you found working as a woman in these areas that combine kind of fundraising with policy and agriculture. Have you found obstacles, or do you feel like being a woman in those areas has been harder? I know now I'm asking you that the kibbutzim movement was very egalitarian when it first started, but perhaps in its wider sense, I'm not sure if it's been easy for you.
There are obstacles. I don't think they're unique to Israel. I think it's being a woman in any field that's really striving to make change. I've been in meetings with a senior male professor, and the partners thought I was the secretary, and that's fine by me. I actually had dinner with a very impressive female leader last night, and I was asking her about it. And I said, does it ever bother you? And she says, absolutely not. They just have such low expectations.
Yeah, you can be disarming like that. Totally.
They've come and I've eaten all their breakfast before they've even, sat down, and I'm done. So yeah, I think there are challenges. I think the way you address them or acknowledge them or treat them, and you can just focus on the goal. Don't let anyone stand in your way. It doesn't really matter. So yeah.
And looking more broadly, I often bemoan the lack of women in politics in Israel, particularly at the moment. But if there was a woman asking, or the women asking about how to make an impact on Israeli society, whether it's in politics or civic society or NGOs more broadly, how would you advise them to build influence to have an impact in Israel?
I would say start. Don't plan. Planning where things you could sit at the table forever. Just start.
Not the Israeli way.
Exactly. I think you have to start. I think you have to build trust. People have to trust you. They have to know that you're genuine, and you have to come with expertise and some value to add. And I think slowly you start to build circles of influence. You become a trusted source. People will go to you for your opinion. You have influence to change how things are done, and never take no for an answer.
And don't be too polite and too English.
Yeah, if need be, you can switch to Hebrew and become more aggressive.
So bringing things to a close, I feel like I want to go back to the beginning where we talked about the incredible devastation that was wrought on the communities in the south in particular, but also in the north when people had to evacuate. And you've spoken a lot, and I've read a lot of your writings about this existential crisis that was felt by the farming communities, and we can't underestimate that.
Yeah.
But when I hear you talk, I hear a lot of hope in your voice, and I hear, such a proactive sense of getting things done and making an impact. So I wonder, very personally, how hopeful do you really feel inside, given how much has collapsed around us? And how do you, as a leader, cultivate that kind of hope in your team and in others about the future of Israeli agriculture and Israel as a society? Big question.
It is. I think it's very easy today to look at the news, to look at the discord and the infighting in the country and get very pessimistic and not hopeful. I don't think we can afford ourselves that luxury. I think we have to be hopeful to live here, not just in Israel, probably in the world today. I think we have to believe that we can be agents of change and create a better future for our children. And I think we just have to understand that in order to do that, you need a big vision. And I think if you can articulate a vision which describes a better future and galvanize people to come behind and to follow it and to believe that we can get there, I think that's the only way to live and to operate, honestly. So that's what I try to do with my team. I try to do it usually. I try to minimize, the negative impact from the news, because otherwise you can just drown. I think we have to be optimistic and hopeful for the future. And I think that's the Jewish way. Listen, met so many farmers from the south and from the north who had to quite literally rise from the ashes and start again. Where do they draw their strength and determination from? And it's such a Jewish thing, to look at devastation in the face, mourn for a loss, and rebuild. It's a Jewish, I feel like it's part of our DNA and who it's been.
Totally. And, not to dwell in the lows, but to know that after lows, there will be highs, because that's always been the arc of Jewish history.
Unfortunately. And unfortunately, it repeats itself. But I also think we need a lot of perspective. We are such a tiny dot or a chapter in the long history, please God, of the Jewish people.
Exactly.
All we can do is contribute our small bit. and try and make it better for the future.
I remember in the Anu Museum, they have a way of explaining it called the oscillating narrative, where, it goes up, it comes down, and we have to remember that we are, like you say, just at one small moment in that long history. Do you have any examples or stories of anybody that you've met on your travels or, in this work that inspired you from the South in that sense?
Yes. Moran Freibach, who he's a very special farmer in kibbutz Nachal Oz, the one that showed me about the agricultural terrorism. He had a very difficult personal story from October the 7th. He's one of the farmers that survived, holding the door to his safe room the whole day. His row of houses was very badly hit by Hamas, people killed and taken hostage. And within 3 days, he went back. And he went back to a region that was still under fire. He went back not knowing the fate of his best friend, Sahi Dan, who was a hostage who was killed in captivity. He went back having lost friends and family, and he went back to rebuild. And I remember seeing him, and he's like, Danielle, eye on the goal, push forward day after day, just push forward. And after everything he's been through, he's a very inspirational figure for me.
Incredible. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Gosh. So in terms of your eye on the goal, if I can end by asking you what success looks like if you're looking ahead, say 12 months or 24 months from now, where would you like Israel to be in terms of your work?
I would like all of the farming communities across Israel's borders that were impacted by the war to not only have rebuilt, but to be on track to be growing back stronger, so integrating technologies to be more productive and profitable and stronger. I would like them to be a source to draw back the communities to our borders. And I would like them to be a source of partnership for countries around the world who are once again coming back to Israel to not only learn from what Israel's done historically, but from our brave pioneering farmers on the border. And then we'll see new avenues of partnership and collaboration globally too. That's where we're going to be in 24 months, please God.
Please God. Well, I want to thank you for the work you're doing. I think it's really a Kiddush Hashem and really incredible. I've been very inspired to hear from you in more detail, and I've learned a lot. So thank you so much, Danielle, for joining me on Women's Gallery.
Thank you, Joanne.
Thank you to all our wonderful listeners for being part of this. And please, can I ask you to share with any friends, family? Do leave a rating and review, and please look out for more LSJS learning opportunities. We've got lots and lots of tours coming up specifically, and a shout out to Michael Rainsbury, who Danielle knows well, who puts it all together for us. Really do have a look on our website, lsjs.ac.uk for more, and I look forward to you joining next time. Thank you.